Thank you, Parker, for joining Roots Down Regenerative AF Podcast. As you know, this podcast is all about the environment, how we build a better environment here in the urban sector, which can be a really good way for people to get involved in environmentalism, because that's where people are. People are here in the urban environment. Everyone from like politicians to developers to artists to landscapers on this podcast. So I'm really excited to invite you on the podcast. Tell the audience who you are.
My name is Parker Short. I'm a former colleague of Mr. Rosenthal's in DeKalb County government, but I'm a lifelong DeKalb County resident. I'm a graduate of Dunwoody High School.
Yep, Dunwoody.
Dunwoody, baby.
Just like 20 years apart.
Yeah, I graduated from Dunwoody High School in 2020, and at that point I was the chairman of the High School Democrats of Georgia. I started to get involved in politics in high school. I went to the University of Michigan, got my degree in public policy. I'm now doing my master's in public policy at Duke. I'm the former chairman of the Young Democrats of Georgia, and I've twice been a delegate representing the 6th and 4th Georgia congressional districts. So, I try and be an advocate for young people in the interest of the next generation in the political and policy space.
Yeah, you have been a force, so much so that my 15-year-old daughter and all of her friends know who you are, which is great, which gets them involved. You've been a force for the young people, even though you've got a really young face. So all the people are like, oh, he's so young and fresh and he's got so much hope. And you do have a lot of hope. We were just talking about that. It's been a month. It seems like 4 years. Mm-hmm. I'm in a fever dream every day, right? It's bleak. I wake up every day and I feel like everything's unraveling. I feel like we're playing like a psychotic game of whack-a-mole. There's really so many things to focus on because so many things are happening all at once, right? I mean, you've got, not just, which concerns me, and I'm going to talk about this like staying in my lane kind of thing. Like the environmental space, I think like we got notifications about our EPA grants. They're gutted. We had like $2.5 million of the EPA grants that we did for the Inflation Reduction community grants that we participated in. We're not going to ever see the light. Those aren't going to see the light of day. My question to you is, how do we stay focused and how do we stay in our lane? Give people some insight about where we're going to go from here, like especially in the environmental space where I'm at. Like, how do we stay focused? How do we stay fighting for environmentalism when, all of our rights are seeming to be like all of our federal jobs are going away? This is bad times.
And what Donald Trump is trying to do right now, it's a blitz strategy. He's trying to distract us with as many irreverent and impactful executive orders all mixed together, from attacking birthright citizenship, which is blatantly illegal, to plastic straws. I don't know if you saw this. He said that the federal government can no longer procure paper straws.
I couldn't believe that.
It's ridiculous.
Of all the things
that he would spend his time on. And that to an organizer, whether you're in the healthcare space or the environmental space, you feel very torn right now. I've spoken to a lot of organizers. They feel torn about what they can do because one thing I'm doing for my master's program at Duke is that we have a client project. So I'm working with 4 local governments in Western North Carolina that have been impacted by Hurricane Helene. And I spoke to one of these local leaders yesterday, and she was telling me about how they had taken away this $4 million grant to help people get technology, specifically children who are at school, whose families don't have technology at home, and they've made a huge community impact, and that has been taken. Unfortunately, for the next 4 years, although it seems like we've already been through 4 years, we cannot rely on the federal government. And our state governments are going to be in crisis. Our local governments are going to be in crisis. I mean, so much of this Department of Education funding, the FEMA funding, having to come back to the states where these resources are no longer available. We're in a moment of crisis, and everything is up in the air. But when everything is up in the air, that also presents an opportunity. I think that we can build something meaningful, we can build something better, but we cannot rely on the federal government. And in many cases, organizers aren't able to rely on their state or local governments. I mean, we've worked in DeKalb County with an environmental progressive advocate, and what do we run into every day? State preemption, where the state is stopping local governments from making meaningful impacts. Well, when you run into a barrier, you have to look at the realities around you. And I think that what we're going to see over these next 4 years is that people are going to recognize that their power comes within community. It comes within their networks. And when you reach out to people that have similar values, that want to make a difference in their community, you'll be able to make that impact. And that can be, you having a community cleanup group, or you trying to tell your neighbors, hey, we cannot have gas powered lawn equipment in our neighborhood because it's bad for the environment. It's bad for our neighbors' children. It's bad for our future. And unfortunately, I feel like our politics, at much because of Donald Trump, has become divided to the point where people who disagree cannot talk to each other, especially about difficult issues. But I think there is so much space in the environmental movement. I was talking to a legislator in Georgia, and he told me, yeah, all these Republicans in my district are environmentalists. You just have to tell them it's conservationism.
That's right.
Yeah.
You throw the word climate into it, and it's, for me, it's a talking point that's just become so polarizing. And they, we've talked about this before, but I was in rural Georgia farming, and it was the platform I was on when I was there. I was talking about land conservation. I was talking about environmental impacts. We were talking about soil degradation. These farmers and ranchers care. They give a shit about that, right? They give a shit about if they can hunt anymore. If they can't hunt, then that affects them and their family. If they rely on that meat source. And you're right. It's just so frustrating. I hear you. I really do. I think that it is all going to be about community and community building and trying to open up that conversation. But what I think this administration has done really well is divided us to the point where we don't. I'm speaking for myself. I don't even want to have conversations with people that voted for him.
Yeah. No, and it's difficult. It's not something that I think anybody who voted on the other side is eager to talk to somebody who voted the other way.
Right.
And that's really sad. But it's understandable. I can understand how many people feel. My mom is a super partisan liberal. She's like one of those Facebook fighting kind of people. And it's hard for people to have these conversations because it feels like, oh, you're attacking my rights. You're attacking my identity. And in many cases, that is what this Republican Party is doing.
Right.
But it's not always going up to the guy in the MAGA hat and telling him, you got to believe in climate change. Sometimes it's talking to people who are disengaged. There's so many people in Georgia who are not registered to vote, who are not deeply involved in politics, and who are just skeptical of the political system in general.
My barber.
Yeah.
I'm not even going to mention the name of where I get my haircut. He said, I just don't care. And he, young guy in his mid-20s, about to get married. And I was like, are you going to vote in this election? And he looked at me like I was crazy. And that shows you how many people are disengaged.
Yeah, because they don't trust the system. And that's something that Trump exploited. He's like, the system is broken, only I can fix it. And they're going about it with this burn it down mentality. And I understand why many Americans are distrustful of systems of power and skeptical, as they rightfully should be.
Right.
But at the same time, I do think, this is a wake-up call for Democrats to get in touch with what people are actually feeling and represent them, and understand that, these humongous systems of power, not necessarily firing people from the CDC, but Democrats shouldn't be scared to talk about campaign finance being broken. One thing I appreciate about Senator Ossoff is my conservative friends will say, I really appreciate that congressional stock trading stuff. I really appreciate him trying to get corruption out in that way. And our politics in many ways is so broken. And it's not necessarily a partisan issue. And we talked about Eric Adams earlier. He is a Democrat mayor of New York who is being relieved of federal charges by a Republican president because he has promised to serve the Republican president's agenda. I'm very happy that Bob Menendez is going to jail. And I think more corrupt politicians like Eric Adams and Donald Trump should go to jail, because we have this legalized corruption where it's, you go on a ski retreat with all your pharma donors, like Mike Lee did. It's ridiculous. And I think people are rightfully distrustful of that. But there is a way to break through that. And being from Georgia does give me some hope, because you look at Ossoff and Warnock, I think they are genuine representations of what the party should be. They are dutifully trying to
serve. A Jewish man and a black man, a preacher. I mean, yes.
And they're dutifully trying to serve the people. They're not afraid to say something that kind of brushes up against the party's mainstream. They're not afraid to take tough votes.
I agree.
And I was complaining earlier about Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer. It infuriates me that the leadership of the Democratic Party are two men, both from New York, both of whom are generally out of touch with the American people, have very close ties to APAC and the tech world, and are more focused on how much money they can raise than how much they can deliver for Americans and put money back in their pocketbooks. And it frustrates me when we have such great talent like AOC, like John Ossoff, like Raphael Warnock, like Gretchen Whitmer, but we still see the powers, the institutional levers of power controlled by folks that are being somewhat inefficient and
Right.
incompetent. And I think we can always do better. And if nobody else is going to do it, we have to. Nobody else.
So let's go back to something
Yeah.
in the conversation. I want to talk about um, our federal mishaps, and one big one, us getting out of the Paris Climate Accords. Well, and then also some billionaires backing us back into the Paris Climate Accords, which I think is brilliant. I think it's really, really brilliant. So a lot of like my friends, a lot of the community, like let's talk about like real local stuff. They're very concerned about that. But I keep from the hilltop, I'm screaming, I'm saying climate action doesn't happen at a federal level. It doesn't. It's a small community-based level. It needs to be. It really needs to be. And for me, it's bleak. I understand, like, I think for Donald Trump, it's just him making things more polarized and being making it political when it shouldn't be. You know, it really, really shouldn't be. I think like we know that now climate change is real, and we know that solving it can bring a lot of dollars. You know, like a lot of innovation, and we could be, like the Swedes, and less energy, more energy efficient. So I just wonder what your take is on that. Tell me like what your take is on the federal level, and what can we start doing, or what can we start thinking about on the local level to not be so dismayed by that decision?
Yeah. One thing that does come to mind, I'm glad you steered the conversation back this way because it makes me think of Congressman Buddy Carter. He's a Republican representing the coast down in Georgia, and he will say all the time, I believe in climate change. I see it every day. I live on St. Simon's Island. The sea levels are rising, the climate's changing, but I don't think we should do anything about it. And as a Republican, he's trying to hear his constituents in their nice beach homes who are feeling the impacts of climate change, but he's not willing to do anything about it. And I'm not expecting meaningful climate legislation from the federal level in the next 4 years.
Right.
But states like California have obviously shown that you can make an impact. And because of their emission standards, that impacts the entire country. So when local leaders try and make those steps, however small or large they may be, they make an impact and they inspire other people to do the same thing. One good thing I will give to the Republicans in Georgia is they have been very focused through the Georgia Department of Natural Resources on buying as much forest land as possible and preserving it. They were going to try and buy hundreds of thousands of acres from the city of Atlanta. They own these two forest tracts, one in Paulding and one near Cumming, that were hypothetically going to be an airport. They bought them in the 1950s, hundreds of thousands of acres of forest. They had lined up this big deal to buy and preserve all this forest land. As soon as Trump got in, that all fell through. And all these Republicans at the Department of Natural Resources are like, we wanted to preserve that forest land for our hunters, for the people who will go out and enjoy nature. And that's the lens through which these Republicans view the conversation. We view the conversation through the fact that you want your daughter to be able to grow up in a world that's not boiling. We want to have a better future and a sustainable future that allows for humanity to flourish.
I think it needs to be a global conversation, but I think it needs to be a local solution.
And that's the thing with the global conversation. When the United States will try and go to other countries and be like, we should pursue these ambitious climate goals, they'll often look at us like, oh, how about you, you hypocrite. And that's a difficult thing to sell. And I think before you change the world, you have to try and change yourself. And we have quite a long ways to go, and we absolutely have to use diplomacy and try and push other countries in the right direction.
Yeah, I say that all the time.
But our local folks are still making bad decisions. And honestly, they're often very costly decisions. When we're investing in more natural gas and oil infrastructure, what's up in North DeKalb near the water plants in Doraville. There's all these petroleum refinery plants. 20 years, those are going to be close to obsolete. If we don't start to approach these things and manage the transition, we're going to be on the wrong end of it.
We have a growing county of almost 1 million people, and we have an infrastructure problem. We have an infrastructure problem.
Can we talk about the water?
I mean, yeah, 100%.
If they did not,
it's right in line. This is all about regeneration in the urban community, and water is
super important. Water is a human right. It is one of the most fundamental things. And then everybody likes to talk about difference in politics. The one thing we all have in common in DeKalb County is the water system. We feel the impact of our water system every day when we take a shower, or hopefully we feel it when we take a shower every day. But that is something that's so.
Except for my shower dribbles, and it doesn't have enough pressure, and we just need to get these new shower heads that have more. I'm kidding.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, it's just.
The people don't think about water policy. It's not exciting. It's not in the conversation the same way as inflation or
until it doesn't fucking work.
Until it doesn't work. Like there was a week in Brookhaven, no water. Peachtree Road. There's 60 feet of water spurting up in the air.
Yeah.
And this goes to the point about like the environment and making environmental policy is not always the sexiest policy choice, but it is the most thoughtful one that you can make.
Absolutely.
And for me, water ties into that a lot because water and sewage, the sewer was thought to overflow, and then your neighborhood reeks of human feces. And I'll end on this point. Shirley Franklin is one of the most storied mayors of Atlanta. And in her 8 years, she's like, I'm going to be the public art mayor. I'm going to do public art for everybody. She ended up as the sewer mayor. She spent $2 billion.
Art to shit.
Public art to shit. And if you see her speak, she'll make some jokes. She'll be like, it's a little shitty. I want to be the public art mayor, but I'm the sewer mayor. I guess it's shitty, but I'm okay with it. But she spent $2 trillion on stopping sewer overflows and $2 billion on stopping sewer overflows and $1 billion on drinking water infrastructure. If they did not put chemicals in our water in DeKalb, it would come out a little brown because the pipes are so rusty. And I really appreciate our new CEO trying to kind of bite that bullet now, so we're not drinking dirty water later.
Big shout out.
Shout out to
this is what we need. We need proactive solutions. We don't need to. Everything's a band-aid. Like you see county government, and it's like I think everything. I'm not dissing the past administration. No shame in anyone's game. But I will say that it seems that in the last decade and a half, there's been a lot of this is happening. We need to be reactionary.
Since 2010, we've been under a federal consent decree for failing to stop sewer overflows in the county. And I do not mean to slight our last CEO, Michael Thurman, but he even said...
You said the name, I did not.
I know. I said it. I brought it up. I brought it up. He said, as he was leaving office, in a court document, we don't have enough time and enough money. Yeah. For the last year, they've been delaying trying to do an increase on these rates. It's extraordinarily important. Now we're at the risk of $100 million in liability because of these sewer overflows, because we're not trying to stop this. In the last 20 years, we've had one water rate increase, 6% in 2019. And in policy making, you have to make tough decisions that might not sound great now, but will really make an impact later. And I am really grateful that Lorraine Cochran-Johnson is kind of fitting into that mold of Shirley Franklin, of trying to make tough decisions that might not be the easiest to sell.
Well, they're not the sexiest either. Yeah, you mentioned that. And I'm a big fan of Lorraine, and I think she's going to do. I think this is a tough county to work in, and she has her work cut out for her. But I am backing her and supporting her because I think that is not the sexiest decision she could have made, to focus on, but it is the most necessary.
And that's what I really appreciate. Like, that's good leadership. You get in there, and it's not like, what can I do to score some points? It's what do I need to do? Honestly, I think if anyone who had been elected CEO of DeKalb County had gone in there and realized anything other than water policy is their first big thing to tackle, it is the biggest issue. And to ignore that is to almost be blind.
This podcast doesn't just happen on its own. We want to say thank you so much to our sponsors. First and foremost, new sponsor and really good dear friends of mine, the Microlife Institute. I want to say thank you, Will Johnston. They're all about less space, more life. If you want to know more about how the housing industry intersects with climate action, ask Will. He'll give you incentives on why we need different and more affordable housing options in our urban sector. I want to also say thank you so much to AGSA. AGSA has been a legacy sponsor for the podcast, and we couldn't do it without them. Thank you so much, Dan, and thank you, AGSA, for leading the way in creating better, more resilient options for landscapers to move towards electrification. So thank you so much, sponsors. Hope to get more sponsors for season 2. Look out, World Roots Down Regenerative AF Podcast is coming to you.
So I want to poke a little bit at this bear because I think, we, or if you don't know, in DeKalb County, we piloted a project with Compost Now. They are going to be a sponsor. So I'm going to go ahead and shout them out. Compost Now. And we're piloting a project in Avondale about how, on food waste, right? And then I've taken a couple tours of the landfill, the Seminole landfill. I get fucking worried when I'm there. I'm like, it's easy to just set it or throw your trash away and never see it again. It's easy for me here to throw it in a chute and I don't have to see it again.
It's hard to see it again.
But when you see it again, you're like, oh shit, that's where all my shit goes. But we have a big food waste issue, huge food waste issue. And the fact, so I want to talk about yes, I get dismayed by us pulling out of the Paris Climate Accord, but then I'm like, well shit, we can make these local solutions. Food waste, solving this here at a local level, I think
doable.
It's so fucking doable.
It's so doable. And it makes a huge impact. I mean, you've seen some of the studies, 40% of trash is food waste. It's ridiculous.
And 40% of over 40% of all food grown in the US goes into the trash bin.
Horrible.
And we have starving people.
It's ridiculous.
It's absurd.
It's inefficient. And I think it kind of shows how messed up a little. Everyone's like, oh, capitalism is so perfect, but we've got all these bananas and cabbages sitting in the trash. It's wasteful. And people understand how impactful food can be. And what I think many Americans, 20-25% of Americans are constantly experiencing food insecurity. And that is an interesting environmental conversation because how you grow your food, the types of food that we're choosing to grow and the carbon impact, that is a much broader scope that many people don't think about when they're eating their meals.
Yeah. Well, we have taught people the scarcity mindset. So to most people, they think there's not enough food. But I can tell you, with the amount of food that probably Whole Foods right down the street goes away every day, we'd be able to feed the Decatur community, the homeless population. It's just about it's all infrastructure and it's policy.
And then there's liability laws about
policy.
It's ridiculous.
Policy.
A lot of it is, and it's
a shame.
I say this all the time. I honestly have worn this out. But my grandfather was on his deathbed, and the nurse asked him, "Sir, are you allergic to anything?" And he said, "Inefficiency and incompetence." And I'm going to say that till the day I die. I'm going to say that on my deathbed. I think it is the most clever thing to say. And what do we run into all the time in government?
Yeah.
Inefficiency and incompetence. And it's about these, you're not going to have the federal government pass a bill that tries to reduce food waste in your community. But you can do that. And your local representatives will listen to you. I mean, the landscape of DeKalb County politics. If you had 100 people coming in here into the DeKalb County Commission meeting talking about the need to reduce food waste, the need for composting, that would make a difference. Now imagine that at a Dunwoody City Council meeting, they'd be sweating in their timbers.
Yeah, it's true. I think that, and I was just talking to Compost Now yesterday, Kat at Compost Now. I want to call her out because we had the most amazing conversation. And it should have been a podcast episode because we were just riffing off each other. And it's just, there's been no storyteller. And the people don't really understand food waste is a problem, right? It's a problem. They don't see it as a solution to our climate issues. I do. I see food waste becoming compost, and I see compost getting into the hands of everybody and us being able to cover our urban soils with it. Because if you tested our urban soils, and I have, they're bad. They're dead. It's dead. There's no biodiversity in the soils here. It's all completely dead from over irrigation and over fertilization and spraying. We need to be able to show what and now I'm getting back to like the global versus local. We need to show what these local solutions look like. And if we're regenerating our soil, then we have a carbon solution right here. And I think food waste becomes a part of that conversation.
Yep.
You know, how do we regenerate? So we're not really bringing people in and telling them how. We're just teaching them that these big problems exist. You know, the rainforest is you know, California's in trouble, but no real local solutions. So we're talking about like, you know, local storytelling is really what's
exactly. And that makes me think, I did my undergrad at Michigan. Ann Arbor is such a progressive town, and they've got, you know, I lived in a college house with my buddies. We had a huge compost bin, like bigger than I am. And they would pick it up on the street every 2 weeks. And because of that,
the city or the school?
The city of Ann Arbor, they had a huge compost system. They had like actual compost processing. And because of that, all the local businesses had that compost bin. All the local businesses didn't use plastic. They used compost-friendly cups. And that started to make a huge impact in the community, where, you know, I feel like I would probably waste about 1/2 as much as I would, you know, in Georgia, in Ann Arbor, because all the one-use plastics are replaced with compostable solutions, because compost is so like easy and accessible, where, you know, everyone is using it almost all the time. It almost becomes the staple, because if you go to a coffee shop and every cup is compostable and the ice, you're just gonna, instead of having a trash can full of cups, you're gonna have a compost bin full of cups. And that makes a huge impact on the community. And like, as a policy student, where does the federal government get their ideas? They get their idea from the laboratory of the states. When a state government has a good idea, it usually will end up on a federal level. Well, where do the state governments get their ideas? Usually from a local level, from local governments doing something that works or doesn't work, and them using that to, you know, pass that policy.
The public, it's the private-public partnership that we need to invest in, because and I mean, again, like, it's the Compost Now project is a perfect.
Yeah, Compost Now is a great organization that does great work. And like, if we were to try and get DeKalb, we have issues with our sanitation as it is. You know, who knows where the recycling in DeKalb County and the city of Atlanta and Fulton County go? No, I don't know.
No clue.
Nobody knows. But like, if we were to try and add that to the capacity of DeKalb County, that would be very difficult for them to pick up. But somebody like Compost Now, who has done very successful in Avondale, shows the feasibility of that kind of project, and they're able to do it in a very efficient way. So for all the conservatives that want to, you know, privatize government industries, let's you know, start with something that will make a real meaningful community impact.
Well, City of Decatur said it wouldn't be possible, and then Avondale piloted the project, and you know, thanks to the USDA, and now they're like, well, where are we on this? And they're FOMO. It's FOMO.
Yeah.
You know, and it's got to be like climate action. I say this a lot, and I don't mean to pick on anybody in the world here, but like, it's got to be a cool kids club. You know, if we're gonna get the masses involved in something like great, we need to bring all people. You know, we need to have influence. And I think that's what the Avondale Estates program did. Yeah. It was influence. It was social media. It was like us not door knocking and doing all the things we did. Because now Decatur wants a part of it. Decatur is getting a part of it. Now Shanley's going to want a part of it.
And Brookhaven and Dunwoody, and now Fulton County.
I want to see Brookhaven. We should absolutely talk to them. You've got some connections.
I'm telling you, if you get Brookhaven in it, Dunwoody will get jealous so quickly.
Dunwoody, they just. Do you think Brookhaven would do it before Dunwoody would, or no?
I mean, I could see Dunwoody considering it. There'd have to be like community calls. Brookhaven's a little bit wealthier, I think it actually has a bigger population. I think it is just kind of the dynamics of the two cities. It'd be like, okay, are you running it in the neighborhoods, or are you running it? Because they're both pretty large cities with very differing populations. So I know all those policymakers up there want to be very thoughtful and pragmatic about how it was rolled out. But I definitely think they'd be open to it, because their constituents would love it.
Are you going to help lobby for this?
Yeah.
If we put together a platform, will you help?
Absolutely. I used to be on the Dunwoody Sustainability Committee when I was in high school. And one thing that I lobbied for a lot was a program where, you know, we've got like 25 swim tennis communities in Dunwoody. And I was like, we should support like compost programs at each of these swim tennises. We should have like a compost bin. We should have a local person go in, teach them how to set up the compost bin. The whole community can use it. Because at my swim tennis, we have Friday night dinners every Friday night.
I love that.
And then all the food after the Friday night dinner, I'm like, compost bin. Let's do it. The city, that was a while ago, but there's definitely that kind of want for those policies, and I think that's true whether it's Dunwoody, Decatur, or Decula. People realize like the need for that, and people compost in their own backyards. I think they'd appreciate having the real infrastructure available, like Compost Now has provided in Avondale.
Yeah, we talked about why local is so important, right? Give us some advice. Give us some hope. I know it's hard, and it's really hard to dig deep, but I'm asking you, like, what tools do we want to fight with at a local level? And you could use, this could be broad, like broad policies. It doesn't have to be about environmental policies, but give us some words of encouragement, ways we could do. And I ask you this. I want you to not only just talk to the adults, I really want you to talk to the 18 to 25-year-olds.
Well, I'll go even a little deeper. I'll talk to the 14 to 25-year-olds. Honestly, I think one of the most impactful moments for me since the election was I went back to my Dunwoody High School Young Democrats chapter, and I spoke to the high schoolers there today. I started that when I was 15, and now, however many years later, it was really, really meaningful to see these kids are exactly where I was at when Trump won the first time. They're thinking, what can I do? How can I fight back? Where's my power? And they were asking me the question of, what can I do? And one girl she was talking about how ICE is doing raids across Dunwoody.
God, it's scary. Yeah.
And how a bunch of students didn't show up to school one day, and she started crying. And I wanted to break down there right with her, but we have to give each other hope. And again, it starts with like building community power and supporting each other. But I think people need to recognize the power in their voice. And she asked me, like, what can I do about this? I'm like, if 10 Dunwoody High School students put out a letter about how these ICE attacks are dividing their community and hurting their family, that would be meaningful.
Put a letter to where? Where does it go? That's even me. I'm 47 and I don't know where to fucking put a letter. I don't know where to write a letter.
On social media, even emailing it to the local paper, just using your voice wherever you can. Talking to your family members about these things and trying to hold people accountable. A lot of these Trump folks want to live in a world of delusion. When you bring the facts to them, when you're real with them, like, it's hard for a lot of people to reckon with a lot of the things that Trump does. And one thing, whenever I talk to a Republican in Georgia, I always get them. I'm like, do you think Trump won Georgia in 2020? And they will always say no, because he didn't win and he lost. And they know that Brad Raffensperger and they know deep down in there, some kind of semblance of right and wrong. But when you don't challenge them, people get to live in their bubble, and Republicans have been going around trying to pop all these Democrats' bubbles, whether it's about transports or immigration. That whole election was popping the Democrats' bubble. We need to go and pop the Republicans' bubble. You guys are storming churches to deport people. You guys are firing career workers at the CDC that are trying to stop the spread of Ebola around the world, trying to combat bird flu at home. When I went viral, like, the thing that I think people really found impactful was like, okay, funny, happy, dancing kid. But when they looked into me, it was like, oh, he's been organizing politics for 8 years. And then they put me on MSNBC, and I was like, I'm a Democrat because I lost my dad as a little kid, and Social Security impacted my life.
Right.
And like, my friends have heard that. This is why I'm motivated and involved in politics. And I think it's difficult for Republicans to go and be like, oh, we got to cut Social Security. I'm like, this country has invested me to the point where I've worked in state, local, and federal government. I got a Pell degree, a Pell grant, and I'm working on my master's degree. Like, there is so much value in good public policy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Republicans, when Donald Trump tries and touch their Medicaid, their Medicare, or their Social Security,
hold on,
they're gonna, there's gonna be steam coming off their heads because they feel that too.
I see the unraveling happening now.
And it will be slow, but the more that we hold their feet to the fire, the more we hold them accountable. Republicans love to do all this division stuff. I don't think we have to go out there and call Republicans Nazis to try and divide this country. I think we need to talk about how horrible the stuff they are doing is, to try and be like, hey, this division agenda, this tear it all down stuff, our neighbors are going to lose their jobs at the CDC.
Oh yeah,
it's going to have resounding impacts in every community across the country. from the poorest school districts to, you know, Washington, D.C., where everybody's on some kind of grant or something. And then those ripple effects will spread locally and around the world, whether that's, you know, the spread of HIV because prevention and research is not being done, or the price of eggs going up. Because, you know, the CDC has been barred from releasing research reports on bird flu. They had one that was supposed to come out last week. They're barred from doing that. But when we bring the conversation to people, when we hold their feet to the fire, we have to be the messengers and the fighters and the champions.
Right.
Like, you look at any movement across history, any of these meaningful political movements, political change doesn't start from the top down. You don't win elections from the top down. It is a bottom up movement. And when people are building local community power, that's going to make the difference.
Yeah.
I mean, Ken Martin could be Superman, and there's nothing that he could do as chair of the DNC that is fundamentally like going to change what the Trump administration is doing. It takes people locally building that power, bringing the fight to folks, engaging new people, that makes a difference. And that's why I think Georgia was the only swing state. That's why, because we did that in Georgia with the Georgia Young Democrats, I think that's why Georgia was the only swing state where Kamala Harris improved her margin with 18 to 29-year-olds over Joe Biden. Because we had that community building, because we had that organization, because we've got the Georgia Young Democrats, which is raising more than $100,000 a year, investing in our college chapters, investing in our high school chapters. There's a network of people doing this work. They need your help, and we all want to support each other, and that's how we recognize our community power and make the difference.
Humble brag.
I am so proud of our Georgia Young Democrats. You could put that on my gravestone and say we picked up 7 points for this group of voters, and every other state Kamala Harris lost more than 2. I'm proud of Georgia for that.
Yeah.
And I think that's not just because of the organizing
You
work.
should be. Yeah, I'm just giving you.
No,
I'm giving you shit.
It's true, but that's going to stick on my mind. I have to find my silver linings from that last election. But that's not just because of the organizing work. Like, I look at the contrast between like Michigan and Wisconsin. Both of them had huge depressions among the youth vote. I think a lot of that is because they live under Democratic leadership. Their abortion rights are protected.
Right.
There's gun safety laws to try and protect them in schools. In Georgia, there's not, you know? And a lot of DeKalb County shifted, 2-3 points to the right. Barrow County, where there was the Appalachia High School shooting, shifted to the left. And there's very strange political dynamics. People feel the impact of good policy and bad policy. And in Georgia, we've had a lot of bad Republican policy. And I think we're going to continue to fight against it because people recognize how horrible and corporate serving this leadership is.
Thanks for bringing us hope. Thanks for donning our
Thank you
door,
for always bringing
donning our
hope.
door with light instead of darkness. If you guys don't know who Parker Short is, get on Instagram.
Don't Google me.
No, Google.
Don't
tell the audience where to find you, because if people are sleeping, then
go on Instagram at parker.short. That's the best place to find me. I'm also on TikTok at parker_short, and occasionally in the AJC.
Love that. Thank you, Parker.
Thank you, Jamie. I appreciate you.
Yeah, adore you. Thank you. So this has been Roots Down, a Regenerative AF podcast. We are moving the needle on climate action in the urban sector, one conversation at a time. We are going to be having more conversations like this, meaningful ones. We expect you guys to listen, like, subscribe. I demand it. So thank you so much for coming to this podcast. Thank you, Parker Short, for being our guest. And thank you, Modera Apartments, for hosting today.
And if y'all want to be a part of the change, listen to Jamie, like and subscribe.
Yes, like, subscribe.